This is CW14 Focus with Robert Hornachek.
Good morning and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Robert Hornachek. Today we're focusing on a relatively new technology and how this new tool is being used in news gathering, public safety, and a lot more. We're talking about drones. I'm joined by Bill Bongle, who's a retired police officer and now is the owner of Titletown Drones. Thanks for coming in.
Good morning and thank you for having me.
First of all, just looking at some of that video, that's the thing about drones. I think that it provides such amazing perspective, doesn't it?
It does. It gives you a perspective that you just can't get from the ground.
Yeah.
The motion, the cinematography, the aerial photos.
Yeah. How did you get interested? So you're a police officer, spent your whole career in law enforcement. How did you decide, when you retired and said, this is something I'm really gonna pursue?
Well, I was looking for a retirement business. I like to stay occupied with things. I've always been kind of a technology guy. I worked for a while as a computer forensic analyst, and then I worked as computer tech. So fixing and repairing things that were technology in nature were very interesting to me. I was also very interested in aviation and model aviation. So I started way back in 2000, I think, just flying planes and helicopters and stuff, and then I was hooked. A lot of people would approach me and say, have you thought of putting a camera on that thing? So way back in the early 2000s, I was doing experiments with aerial photography, and I saw the tremendous applications being a public safety officer, how that may assist us.
Tell us about some of those applications, because before we started we were talking about different videos we've seen, and I know you train law enforcement across the country. What are some of the uses specifically for police when it comes to drones?
Sure, I think there's a misnomer out there that the police are interested in using these for spying or surveillance. They're really not very useful for that. The actual uses that law enforcement is finding right now are tactical awareness. For example, you had a gunman that was barricaded in a home or something. You could put eyes on that and you could give your team on the ground awareness. Hey, did the guy just run out the back door and go into the woods? Or just giving you that awareness. The other things that we're seeing now, especially with natural disasters like the flood in Houston, is the search and rescue capabilities are so tremendous. You can launch one of these things in minutes. You can cover great distances and put them in situations that might be too dangerous for manned aircraft to fly.
Right, because usually you'd have to put the helicopter up, which takes a lot of manpower, a lot of time, and you can get a drone up just like that.
Absolutely.
When it comes to drones, and you brought a few here, tell us about, these are just kind of small personal type drones? Yeah,
these are really hobby drones, but they do have tremendous capabilities. The one in the center there is called the Mavic, and I mean that one has terrific range and a pretty decent camera, 4K video and features like that. So they're GPS controlled. You can fly them in sort of an autopilot mode. If you were to fly and hover, it'll park there while you take your photographs. The little one there is more for taking selfies and for people that are on the go. Both of these are very compact. And then the third one over there is a racing drone. That's a new and upcoming sport. And if you'll see that on ESPN
right.
and other shows like that.
Yeah. How important, when you're talking about drones, how important is training? And I know you're big into training for a lot of things, but when you're talking about drones, how important is it and why is it so important?
It's extremely important for a lot of reasons. Number one, of course, is the safety to the other people around you. We don't want to see a collision and a drone, crashing into a person or property or things like that, or endangering the national airspace. We've heard all these news reports about these close calls with aircraft and things like that. So the training, I see the importance of it, and how I got into the training was when I retired, I was looking for that retirement opportunity, and I looked at the drone market and I saw there's a lot of folks doing real estate photography and everyone wanted to be a photographer. What I realized that there was very little support for people. They were buying these things, they were crashing them, they were wrecking them. Hence I started my repair business and discovered that I was the only repair center in Wisconsin, and found myself sort of flooded with broken drones. So I have a workshop full of busted drones, or shells of them, and then I got people back up in the air. But then I realized, in speaking with those folks, that there was definitely a need to train them and help them avoid those crashes.
Right. Who needs training? Is it just recommended for everybody? Is it mandatory for certain people? How does that work?
A lot of people think that you can just pick one of these up and fly it.
Right.
What happens is people get disoriented. That's when we're crashing into things. 90% of the repairs that come through my shop are drones that have struck trees or fixed objects. So we have those skills that are needed, but we also need to understand the rules, the regulations, and then the local ordinances and laws.
Right.
So I teach those things as well. When you're flying the drone, I mean, if everything's working great, you're fine. But when you're relying on this piece of equipment and you were to have a malfunction, you need to be able to respond to that malfunction and to recover from it. So
Right.
those are the things that I teach.
Yeah, because obviously it's a really neat piece of technology, but you can imagine the trouble you could get into with, being close to airports and people.
Right. No, for example, hobbyists and people who do it for commercial purposes or public safety, they have different rules that they have to follow. So it gets a little complicated. The hobbyists have some general rules about, the altitude. You're not to exceed 400 feet. Don't fly over people. And if you're within 5 miles of an airport, you're to notify them. A lot of people have difficulty. Well, who do I call? And
Right.
What do we do? Whereas the commercial operators have a whole different set of rules, and their where they can fly is based on the type of airspace that they're in. So then it becomes necessary to understand the sectional charts and understanding aviation airspace.
Right, and that's obviously the kind of stuff we had our pilots here at Fox 11
Right.
go through. And what's the advantage to having two pilots? Because I know for our crew, there's always two of them together. There's kind of one that's an eye on the drone, one eye in the sky, kind of. Is that?
It's very good if you're going out on any type of an operation to have that second set of eyes to act as that visual observer to alert you, because your attention is going to be focused on the drone or your remote controller, where the other person can sort of be scanning the sky more, looking for other hazards, things that could come up.
Yeah.
A lot of things can surprise you. There could be a low-flying helicopter that seems to come out of nowhere. You can have predatory birds that decide, mama bird doesn't like a drone near her nest. So things like that can come up. Or power lines, you may not see the power line.
All right. We're talking about some of the uses of drones, and also just the difficulty in operating it, which you were telling me during the commercial break about you can kind of run into some unusual things while you're flying.
Sure. I mean, you're using a remote control that's relying on a radio connection, and sometimes there's interference. We live in a very busy environment for radio interference. You have cell towers and power lines and all kinds of things. So I was using it for an inspection of a building, and this was a 7-story building that was a brick building that they needed to inspect the sides and look at all the seams and the joints to make sure that, or to see where the maintenance was required. And in order to do that job without a drone, they would have to hire a lift truck with 2 guys and a crew for a couple of days with a camera trying to take pictures of this whole thing.
Right.
I was able to accomplish that job in just a couple hours with a drone and a zoom camera. But in doing so, a lot of the buildings, the taller ones especially, will have their space rented out for cell towers or
Right.
cellular antennas.
Sure.
So there's a lot of interference coming off of those, as you could imagine. So how would the drone behave if it lost its connection? Well, they're programmed that they're supposed to climb to a predetermined altitude and then to return home. But if you hadn't scanned the environment and decided, well, how high should that be? In this case, the drone probably could have just run right into the side of the building thinking, it was going home. So by looking at the environment and making those decisions ahead of time in your pre-flight checks and things like that, you can prevent those sorts of accidents from happening.
Wow.
So in this case, when the drone rose above the antennas, I was able to regain the signal and then bring it home safely.
Yeah. We talked at the very beginning of the show, I called this a relatively new technology. You said you've been experimenting with this kind of stuff for, the last 15 years or so. How much has it really sped up, though, in the last couple of years? It seems like it just took off.
Yeah, it's been exponential growth over just the last 3 years, I think. Really, the technology that's in a drone, the thing that really makes it work, is found in your cell phone. The compass, the GPS, the sensors and stuff that detect motion, the speed of the microprocessors, the intricacy in the miniaturization of the cameras, all those things combined have caused this technology to sort of hit that peak rate, or it's not peaked by any means, but we're on a very rapidly increasing pace with the technology.
Yeah. So you're training for law enforcement specifically. Is this something that is widely embraced by police kind of nationwide, or is this kind of, well, there's some who are really into it and some who are really hesitant?
Yeah, we're just starting to see it, and I should mention that to become a commercial licensed operator, you need to pass an FAA knowledge exam, and this is commonly referred to as the Part 107. Okay. That's the part of regulations. But yeah, with respect to the police, what we're seeing is as of August of last year, the FAA changed the rules. Prior to that, most police agencies were required to get a pilot's license, a manned aircraft pilot's license, to fly a drone, when at the same time a 14-year-old kid could go to Best Buy and buy the same drone and fly it. So there was sort of a skewed set of regulations. That's leveled out now, so police agencies can pursue this Part 107 or another method of approval, and it's because of that change, we're seeing many departments starting to move forward.
And when you started off as a police officer, I'm guessing it was maybe a tape recorder?
Yeah.
Can you reflect a little bit on just how far things have come over your career?
Sure. You know, when I started as a police officer, we didn't even have a computer in the squad cars. Then the first mobile data terminals that came, you know, some of the older officers weren't interested. Oh, I don't need that. And then as soon as people started to see the value, then you couldn't find a squad car that didn't have one because everybody wanted them. And the same is true, you know, we saw a lot of resistance in the beginning. You saw a lot of negative stories about the technology, and now people are seeing them save lives, and they're seeing the tremendous applications of how we're keeping people out of harm's way. And as the technologies progress, people are seeing what it does. We're starting to see the more acceptance.
Yeah. What about places where there's not acceptance yet? Because there's still maybe a distrust of police, and they say, oh, we just think the police are going to try to spy on us here.
Yeah, and that is a problem. And a lot of that goes to the relationship, I think, that you have, you know, within your community. I know Los Angeles right now is really struggling. I mean, they were gifted 2 drones from Seattle whose citizens said, we don't want them. So then they gave them to LA. And then when the citizens in LA found out, they said, well, we don't want you to have them either. And they wound up having to destroy them. Now they're going again, and they're trying to reactivate their program. But they're holding these public meetings, and people are showing up and saying, we don't want this. A lot of it is just based on the misunderstanding of what they think that it does and how the police intend to use it.
Say somebody has a drone, they want to get into aerial photography, they want to start, you know, doing real estate photography, things like that. What do they need to do?
Sure. So if you're a recreational user, you do not need a license. There are regulations that you have to follow. But if you want to do commercial work, then you have to get a license through the FAA. And in order to obtain the license, you have to pass a knowledge exam, which isn't an easy exam.
Right. You
really need to study. So I do a one-day boot camp sort of training course to help people prepare for that exam and teach them the things that they're going to need to know. But you need that license. It's a very good idea if you're going to do commercial work to have insurance, liability insurance, especially on your aircraft, because most business insurance companies consider that an extra rider that you need. And so, you know, there's a fair amount of investment. I think the first year that I bought aviation insurance, it was $1,500, you know, annually.
Yeah.
So it's not, I mean, if you're serious about it, you've got to spend a little money, and you aren't going to just go and buy a $500 drone and become a commercial photographer. You know, you've got to invest some time into training and the, you know, protecting your liability, and to buy good equipment.
Yeah. And safety obviously is the #1 priority with all of this stuff, but are there some misconceptions people have about drones, you think?
There are. I mean, it should be noted that there are no recorded collisions between drones and manned aircraft. I think there's been a few stories now that led people to believe that there have been. I know there's been near misses, and that's terrible. People should not be anywhere near, you know, manned aircraft with these things, especially controlled airspace. But that being said, there are no recorded deaths. You know, you look at ATVs and other types of recreational activities that people are involved in, and they, you know, can be hazardous, where this is a relatively safe technology.
Yeah. Last question for you, just about a few seconds to answer, 30 seconds maybe. What do you say to somebody at home who says, you know what, I think I want to get into that. I want to pick one of those up. What should they do?
Do some research. There's a lot of places online that you can go. The FAA has a tremendous resource on their website. They give you information about both recreational and commercial use. People can contact me. I offer training both on a personal level and in a classroom type of setting. So I'll do my best to answer their questions and help them out.
All right. Thank you very much for coming in, Bill. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We want to let you know if you'd like to contact us here at the show, you can email us at the address on the screen there, and you can check us out and contact us through our Facebook page, and head over to cw14online.com. There you can find this entire interview, all of our past shows, and more information on Titletown drones and more information from the FAA.